Do you remember the first time that you went on the internet? I mean, saw a browser, got some information. Do you remember where you were when you first did that?
That was ages ago. I don't know.
I will never forget 1995. I was at UC Berkeley and I checked the Giants baseball scores and it blew me away. Like, oh my, I just typed it in and there it came. And it was something that we've never seen before. I will tell you that this week, I will remember where I was when I used ChatGPT 4.0's new service. When it is, I don't know if you guys saw the videos on YouTube. It is unbelievable what it can do. So this is, and I won't go through everything of it, but what I want to do is I want to play ChatGPT's answer now, and they're using audio voice, and I'm going to do this real time so you guys can hear what it does. And this is just on their app. This is on their normal app. I have the paid service here. I don't know if the free users can get it, but if you have the paid service, you hit the little headphones, and this is what will happen. And then, so I want to ask it a couple questions, and then I'd like you to evaluate its answers. Okay, you guys ready?
Ready.
Okay, let's get started here. Hey, ChatGPT, can you tell me a little bit about Chinese loans in Africa?
Chinese loans in Africa are part of China's extensive efforts to strengthen economic ties with the continent. These loans, provided mainly by Chinese state-owned banks and the government, focus on funding large infrastructure projects such as roads, railways, ports, and energy plants. The impact of these loans can be significant. They help address critical infrastructure needs, fostering economic growth and development in African countries. For instance, the Mombasa-Nairobi Standard Gauge Railway in Kenya, funded by Chinese loans, has improved transportation and trade routes within the region. However, there are concerns about debt sustainability and transparency. Critics argue that some countries might struggle with debt repayment, potentially leading to economic dependence on China. This concept, often referred to as debt trap diplomacy, suggests that China might use debt as leverage to gain control over key assets or exert political influence. While there's debate over the validity of this claim, examples like Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, though not in Africa, often come up in discussions about the potential risks. Overall, Chinese loans in Africa present both opportunities for development and challenges related to financial management and sovereignty.
So, what did you think?
I'm impressed by the nuance. It's way better than it was before.
Cobus, last year when we were looking at this, one of the concerns that you brought up, which actually prompted us to make our own chatbot on our site, which is a closed network only drawing from our content, our interviews, our podcasts, and things like that, was that the narratives that were coming out of the large language models like ChatGPT were drawing on Western news sources and as a result had Western biases built into them. There you hear the debt trap narrative brought up, but it was brought up with a certain degree of nuance that we didn't see in last year's responses from ChatGPT.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I think it also probably reflects to a certain extent a broadening of the discourse itself, kind of because the debt trap thing has come in for a lot more criticism, over the last year or so, but it, so in that sense, it is probably still obviously feeding off, current discussions on the internet, but it does certainly come across more nuance. Early on, the first kind of answers I read struck me as something akin to what, if you were teaching this as a course, like one of your kind of like mid-level students would write, kind of not the smartest kid in the class, but also not the one who's barely showing up. Now it's creeping closer to the to the top of the class, kind of, and it's becoming just more nuanced, more kind of measured, in lots of ways. It'll be very interesting to see how it develops from now on.
Let me ask one more question now, just to see if it picks up. And again, we want to pick up ones with strong U.S. media narratives. Hey, ChatGPT, is China going to build a new military base in Africa?
There have been reports that China is seeking to establish a new military base on Africa's Atlantic coast, specifically in Equatorial Guinea. This potential base would allow Chinese warships to rearm and refit, significantly enhancing China's naval capabilities opposite the east coast of the United States. China already has a military base in Djibouti, established in 2017, which serves strategic purposes like anti-piracy and securing trade routes. This base has evolved from a simple resupply station to a comprehensive logistics facility. The possibility of a new base in Equatorial Guinea fits into China's broader strategy of expanding its global military presence. This expansion includes investments in dual-use facilities, where commercial ports can also serve military purposes, allowing for a more extensive and flexible presence without overtly militarizing new locations. For further details, you might find articles from Chatham House and the United States Institute of Peace helpful.
Ah, that's interesting. Sourcing it, we haven't seen that in the past either. But that was definitely a very American-centered answer. And again, let's be very clear here. That narrative of the Chinese building a base in Equatorial Guinea is not supported by the available evidence or what we know in the scholarship. So that is very much driven by American media narratives. But it is a much more nuanced answer, though.
I mean, when it says there are reports, we know those reports are in the Wall Street Journal.
That's it. I mean, it's primarily Michael Phillips, who's the journalist at the Wall Street Journal, who's basically a mouthpiece for the Pentagon. There's no other way to explain what Michael Phillips, who's the correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, does, but just basically serve as a mouthpiece for the Pentagon on this issue. But Geraud, how do you see now AI and ChatGPT 4.0, and by the way, Google announced a whole new suite of tools this week as well, changing the discourse and the discussion about, say, not just China-Africa, but, coverage of what the Chinese are doing more broadly?
If it continues to engage and includes larger, broader perspective on the debates, I see that it may be helpful, and I think it may just kill reading once for all. Many people who don't like to read, I remember you keep on saying that people, they want story short. Now with ChatGPT having an audio service, people can now at least learn quite fast about all those issues. And for me, my biggest concern remains its nuance, the need of including as much as different perspective and voices into the debate in a way that at the end, the outcome become much more balanced. It becomes, and I love the language, there is a lot of might, may, maybe, there are reports and everything. It shows you that I'm not saying, I'm just, reporting what has been said or in different places. And which means that the more we feed the space with different perspective, the more those ChatGPT and other AI service will become much more balanced. But the less we feed the space, the less one single narrative will be dominating the space, which is going to be negative. So now it maybe raised the question about, for example, a country like China that's closed off, that has a different kind of internet, quote unquote, a different kind of internet. As long as China remain closed like this, how much China expects to see a tool like ChatGPT starting to give nuanced perspective about what's happening in China and what China does overseas? In that answer, let's remember that ChatGPT gave answers from research and scholars that coming from other parts of the world, not China itself. So I do believe that maybe there is an opportunity there for maybe China to understand that it's maybe time to flood the space with different narrative to allow those AI to become much more balanced than skewed toward a single narrative.
Okay, let me show you one other thing. Hey, ChatGPT, can you tell me about China's relationship in Africa, but please answer in French?
Bien sûr. La relation entre la Chine et l'Afrique est complexe et multifacette.
It can do it in Chinese, in French. I mean,
it's impressive.
So we're in a new world now, guys. It's here. This is unbelievable, the power that's coming. And as Cobus, as you pointed out, it's changing very quickly now, as everybody's very excited right now about the potential positive uses. If I was, and I know we have a lot of teachers who listen to us and professors, guess what? It's going to show up in your kids' term papers a lot.
Oh, it already is. It already is. Like, I was speaking to academics a week ago, and they were saying they already are scrambling to find AI detection tools because, so many term papers are written by AI now. So many. It's already a huge problem.
Guys, I've been thinking, since ChatGPT is doing voice service, don't you think that the future of things like podcasts could be in danger as well?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, again, can it bring the level of nuance that we're bringing to this? And there is a human part of this the pace at which this is changing is so fast. And it might also turn into a situation where we become irrelevant because people get enough of the AI-generated crappy news on TikTok and on social media that they really don't need any more from humans. I mean, that is just going to be so overwhelming. And I think we're descending into the 7th layer of hell pretty soon, when so much AI generated misinformation and disinformation is going to populate the ecosystem that people just aren't going to know what's what. And there's nothing that can tell us that ChatGPT is going to remain pure. Right now, it was citing sources from the US Institute of Peace, but this is a year or two old, this technology. Once it becomes weaponized, who knows what's going to happen to it? And that's where I think the human role plays a very important, the human role plays an important part of this whole story, that we will continue to be balanced as much as we can, but people will know where we come from. We're also, they can talk to us and we can show them our sources and whatnot. So I still think there's a role for people, but we have to evolve with it. I mean, it's changing so fast.
Well, kind of, it's also happening in the context of a human-made information crisis, right? Kind of like we're now several years deep into like post the concept of fake news. Human-made disinformation is, kind of is its own huge problem. So, kind of, so we already like crises like, kind of, I think we like the world saw a particular kind of like many examples of that kind of different kinds of misinformation emerging around the Gaza crisis, for example. And, and then that, even though AI has been very involved in parts of the ongoing crisis in Gaza, like we are still babes in the woods, kind of like in relation to its full power. But we're already seeing the impacts of the kind of erosion of the very concept of truth, just simply because of human acts, right? So that's already challenging enough. So I think, this is going to be very interesting, I think.